Hello, I'm Stephanie. This is Stephanie. Very short show today. It's Friday. Normally, we're waiting for the mayor to speak, yet he's going to be on the Brian Lair show on WNYC on the radio show on WN on NPR. So we'll wait for him to speak, and some Monday maybe we'll talk about what he says. Also, what I want to say. Oh, so right now, as I'm trying to keep busy here. Uh, I had my own show, but I was looking to be a producer, so I practiced producing my own news show, daily news show, or I should say 5 days a week, not every day. And I wanted to learn more about the history of Rockland County, where I was born. So I joined the Historical Society of the Nyax, and I was always interested in local history. Yet when someone told me to join the Historical Society of the Nyax, it was my boss at the library. I said, "Oh wow, that's great," because if so many of the people at the library where I worked were from the Historical Society and worked in the local history room. And now a lot of libraries have local history rooms. So being African American, being born in Rockland County, knowing the history of my own family, and also who is not from Rockland County, and knowing the history of other families from Rockland County is really interesting. So the library and the Historical Society published these books about the history of Rockland County, history of blacks, Nyack and black and white race over what is it, 20, uh, not 20 centuries, over a century or. Now I'm forgetting the subtitle of the book. Let me look that up quickly. Why I forget the subtitle of the book. By Carl Nordstrom, who I don't know if is related to the Nordstroms who own the department store. So race over 3 centuries, not 20 centuries. So Nyack and Black and White Race Over 3 Centuries is a book that I was a technician on. It was so interesting that they let me do it. They probably did me a little favor. I was able to just kind of, I wasn't the editor. I was someone who typed parts of the book that were on old, Word Perfect, some type of old software. And it led me to looking at these emails that I received from the Historical Society of Rockland County, being a member of the Historical Society of the Nyax. And I was looking at the New York Heritage digital collections because for some reason, I think you have to pay for the copy. I was a little confused. I thought I could read the latest copy online of the South of the Mountain, which is a publication published by the Historical Society of Rockland County. And then it led me to their digital collection, which goes back to what, the 1940s or 50s, and ends in 2010 online. So I guess they're putting the others, maybe from 2010 to the present decade, online. So I was reading about Rockland Lake today, and I have my script here. Let me think. So yesterday I read about, so I was doing all this research, and I read part of the minutes from the Rockland County Preservation Board. So this is a subject that I'm really interested in, especially if you're African American or maybe immigrant from another nation, or not even immigrant. You have parents that are immigrants and you were born here in the U.S. It is so important to record your history either on video, on audio, or in written text. It's so important because it's so interesting, but it's also so that we kind of know why people are here in the US, why your family was here, what they did as a profession, your parents or grandparents, especially now with the US Census. A lot of people, if you go to ancestry.com, and I'll put this in my notes, I didn't put this in my article, but if you go to ancestry.com, I can tell you that they have records from other countries too, of the other nation's census, but I don't know how many of the other nations have the census or have records on Ancestry.com. But if you go to Ancestry.com, they have good information about African Americans if your parents were born here in the US. If you are consider yourself African American, maybe you're Caribbean, they may have certain documents from Canada if you're Canadian, Caribbean, and uh, of of the Negroid race, I'll say, and or mixed with the Negroid race, it will be interesting. So if you go to ancestry.com, learn more about your history. You can look up your family history on ancestry.com through the census. So let's say you had grandparents that were born, they have records. I think they hold some records, but I know they have records from like 1930s. And you can look up your family's history. If someone in your family was born in the 1930s, they may be listed on the U.S. Census records, and you can see what their profession was and their address, which is fascinating. And let me tell you just a bit of my personal story, which uh, which I'll add to my script, I guess. My personal story with Ancestry.com, not to be a commercial, but it's a great tool, is that they have all these census records online, and it's easy for you to search because you put in a name and some other information, and they pull up the records for you, and you look at the original census. You can see the name of the person, where their address, and their profession that they listed, and then you can see how many people lived in that household. It's absolutely amazing. And when I looked up information with the help of my grandmother, I was able to find her grandfather on the census. And on the census, they have men who served or were like enlisted, or what do you call it when they don't enlist, when they sign up for the army but they're not enlisted, all the men that sign up. He signed up for the war, and we couldn't find what happened to him after that. But what's so interesting is that he was from Pennsylvania, and his address, there was a picture of his address on the website of where he lived when he was young, prior to being her grandfather. And it was so interesting. The coincidence was that the picture was of a building, just any building. I guess someone took a picture in the city of Philadelphia, and it was on Temple University's database, because Temple University has an urban like planning department, and they have old photographs of like buildings in Philadelphia. So as you go searching, look for photographs from the newspaper, from I don't know where they got these pictures from, but he lived in a city, so it was probably just a house that was, someone took a picture of, or they were taking pictures of different types of homes. So it's really interesting. Ancestry.com and the databases that they have online. If you have old addresses in the city, there may be a photograph of that person's home or business. So it was really interesting. And he lived in a. It reminded me of Fred Sanford. He worked at a junkyard, and it reminded me of Fred Sanford and Sanford and Sons. That Red Fox, the comedian. He worked at a junkyard. I don't know if she knew Red Fox, but my grandmother had a lot of interesting things going on in her life. But I found that very interesting. So, so I found information about my grandmother's grandfather. But I forget the year. There was a year that the census burned, or someone burned the office of the census. And there might be a year, not the year because it's every 10 years, but apparently there's like a 10-year, there's one census that's missing parts, and it may hurt. I don't know. It may hurt your search if you're African American. That's what I read, but I might be incorrect. So after reading all of this information, it's really interesting. If any local historians, I'm still trying to find the photograph. My grandmother passed away, but I remember going to visit my grandmother at the paper mill in Piermont, New York, and she worked there. And I remember, I know I told Mr. Perry, I call him Mr. Perry. He's the architect and he's the president of the Historical Society of the Nines. That I remember there being large paper mills as big as a truck. I mean, they were so big, and there were machines that carried the roll of paper. It looked like a big roll, not toilet paper, but just regular paper. And I have to say, it was like maybe at least like 7 foot high. And the machine, they would drive it to get cut or something. It was a big roll. It was so huge. And I just remember picking her up from work and seeing the machine and taking a picture with my grandmother. And the guy, the manager, took the picture. Caucasian man. And she was not the only black worker there, but she worked at the paper plant. So anyway, as this historical, it reminds me of the paper plant. Now there's condominiums there, but we used to go down there, and it was a blue building, and we picked her up from the paper plant near the water. Why would they have a paper plant? Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, uh, she was an interesting lady. So I don't know Miss Emmelies, but I she during a meeting discussed the Hoverkopf, Houvekopf mountain and on County Sewer District Number One property. And she was discussing that because she noted that the Ramapo Lenape Nation considers it a sacred site and is used for ceremonial purposes. So it's called Split Rock. And I left this up here. I'm going to put it in quotes because this is directly from the minutes. And I was like, oh, that sounds so interesting. If they could make that a site on the side of the mountain and preserve it for history, if there, or just put a, not just put a sign there and put a sign there. So I read the minutes of the Rockland County Preservation Board on Monday, November 18, 2019, read that Split Rock site in Hillburn, which is located on Hoverkopf Mountain and on County Sewer District Number One property. She noted that the Ramapo Lenape Nation considers it a sacred site and is used for ceremonial purposes. So it's used for ceremonial purposes, and there is a concern that if the county sells the property on which sits Split Rock, it will be demolished during possible land development. And maybe they could make a historic marker. So it's really interesting that my high school has an Indian emblem, but we don't use any like bad words to associate it. I don't think of having, it's not a mascot. It's to honor local Native Americans. It's not a mascot. It's a brand image. It's an image to help support the promotion of the preservation of the historical history of Native Americans in Rockland County. So we had a big debate about this with local Indians. There was sometimes questionable marketing of the thing. Like we don't do the tomahawk chop anymore. We've learned not to do that. But it's really interesting. So I'm conducting this research about the Rockland County, and like I said, I started reading issues of the South of the Mountain published by the Historical Society of Rockland County online, and they have these issues like from I think the 1950s until 2010, and Like I said, I was reading about the history of Rockland Lake, a place that I frequently go to because there's a path that goes around the lake, and it's a state park, and it connects to Hook Mountain. And you have rock quarrying. There was an amusement park. I don't see any images of the amusement park that replaced the quarry. This is what this man wrote. And hotels and casinos there near the lake. And then you have Hessian Lake near Bear Mountain. They're both, they say, spring fed lakes. Even though I thought Rockland Lake was a man made lake for some reason, which they connected to a spring, I still have to conduct more research about that. But I remember going to Rockland Lake as a kid and they telling us that they used to sell ice there. And it was the Knickerbocker Company. The Knickerbocker Company was a company, a company where different companies merged that sold ice into the Knickerbocker. Which leads me to think of the history of West Point. Because if you look at the buildings of West Point, it's really beautiful. And West Point is near Bear Mountain. So don't go walking around Bear Mountain and West Point. There are hiking paths that are guided because you can you know get lost. But there are hiking paths. There are marked trails that you can walk, and you can walk around Hessian Lake too. So at Bear Mountain State Park, which is not far from Rockland Lake. It's about 10 to 20 minutes. So it's a great way to spend the day going to Rockland Lake or Bear Mountain State Park. And there I just gave you a little bit of the history. Remember, we have our fashion and style, like from Bloomingdale's. I'm a member of the NAACP. There's also the African American Historical Society of Rockland. And let me tell you, I Googled that, and I knew one of the president, Miss Wood. I don't know if she's still the president of the society. I said, oh, this is interesting. And they have a lot of interesting information. They have online exhibits or digital exhibits that you can show. I guess my computer doesn't have enough power to share the screen. So it's the African American Historical Society of Rockland County, New York, linking and preserving our culture. You have to go to their website, aahsmuseum.org. They have a Legacy of Rhythm Part 1 video, which is amazing. And you can discover Rockland's history, explore the history, and they have a virtual museum. And then you have Dr. Arlene Klinkscale, Education Initiative, and I, I think she looks like my old superintendent when I was in elementary school. um, so go to aahsmuseum.org. And you also have the CGIS Institute, and you can look at the history. I always spell it incorrectly. It's the CGIS Institute, CEJJES Institute. That's CEJJES Institute. So I love Dr. Gordon. He was someone that was an author at the book fair that I organized at the Nyack Public Library. And he had a book about education. And we have the CGIS Institute. So the CGIS Institute is a museum, and it's like a small library in Rockland County. And you can go to the website CEJJESinstitute.org. And it looks like you can volunteer there. have nothing else to say today. It's Friday. Hey, remember to conduct your research about if you're from, especially if you're from the suburbs and you're African American, conduct your research about African Americans from suburban counties. It's really important, especially also if you're in an urban area. There's a lot of research done about urban area, but conduct research about your family and your friends' family. It's a lot of fun. But the Cedars Institute is a beautiful, beautiful museum, and that's CEJJESINSTITUTE.org. Thank you for watching. My hair is supposed to be this way. You have to tell it. It's my front of my hair.